This is not a story. This is a warning. Across America, there are places where the nightmares never end, and the truth was buried with the dead. Tonight, we open another door. Welcome to the American Nightmare. There are stories meant to scare you. Stories about ghosts, monsters, and things that wait in the dark. They rely on shock, on spectacle, on things that are easy to dismiss as fiction. This story is different. It isn't meant to frighten you. It's meant to unsettle you, because nothing about it feels exaggerated. Nothing feels staged, and nothing was ever fully explained. What happened in Red Creek in the mid-1990s never made headlines. It existed only in fragments, in family memories, in church records, in handwritten notes, and in the quiet testimony of people who still refuse to talk about it. This is the story of a young woman who began walking to a creek at night, and what followed her home. Red Creek was a small rural town surrounded by farmland and trees, with a narrow waterway cutting through the back of several properties. For generations, families had lived along that creek. It was ordinary, and that was part of what made what happened there so difficult to understand. In 1994, Emily Carter was 21 years old. She lived with her parents and younger brother on a modest farm just outside town. From the back of their property, a narrow footpath led to Red Creek. She had walked it her entire life, but never at night. Not until that spring. It began quietly. Her mother started finding the back door unlocked in the early morning hours, sometimes open, sometimes barely closed. Then she noticed the mud, damp patches near the doorway, faint marks on the kitchen floor, moist cuffs on Emily's jeans. When asked about it, Emily said she couldn't sleep. She said she needed quiet. She said the night helped her think. At first, no one questioned it, but the walks continued. Always after midnight, always alone, always toward the creek. Her bedroom door would open, the back door would click shut, and she would disappear into the dark. Sometimes she was gone for minutes, sometimes for over an hour. When she returned, she went straight to her room. No conversation, no food, no television, just sleep. Within weeks, other changes appeared. She stopped eating regular meals, skipped showers, slept through afternoons, stayed awake at night. When her parents spoke to her, she answered politely but distantly, as if she were listening to something else. One night, her mother followed her. Fog hung over the fields. The moon was hidden behind clouds. Emily stood near the creek, completely still, her head lowered, her arms at her sides. At first, her mother thought she was praying. Then she heard her whispering, not crying, not chanting, talking. Her mother called her name. There was no response. She called again. Emily spoke without turning. "He doesn't like when you interrupt." "Who doesn't?" her mother asked. You wouldn't understand him." Emily walked past her and returned to the house, as if nothing had happened. After that, she began walking barefoot. Her shoes were left by the door. She returned with her feet coated in red clay and dark mud. Rust-colored stains spread across her clothes. Red Creek was known for its iron-rich water, but on her skin it looked unnatural, like dried blood. Mud-stained footprints appeared in the kitchen, in the hallway, outside her bedroom. Wet clothes were found in the sink, sometimes still dripping. When asked why she didn't clean herself, Emily said, "It follows me from the water." Her brother began hearing her at night, standing in her room, facing the window, whispering into the dark, always in the same flat, measured tone. One evening, her father confronted her. He asked why she kept going, why she stood there for hours, why she talked to no one. Emily studied him. "The one who walks behind the creek listens." "What does that mean?" he asked. "It means he's been here longer than we have." That night he followed her. From the edge of the field he watched her walk to the water, watched her stop, watched her whisper into the fog. And across the creek, for just a moment, he thought he saw something standing among the trees, taller than her, darker than the shadows, completely still. He never told anyone what he saw, and by the time he was ready to talk about it, it was already too late. After the night her father followed her to the creek, the walks didn't stop. They became more deliberate, with no hesitation, no secrecy. Emily no longer pretended she was simply restless. She left the house barefoot, leaving her shoes by the door, and following the same path behind the farmhouse every night. As summer turned to fall, the brush thickened, the air cooled. But she continued walking the same route at the same hour, without a flashlight. Within weeks, she stopped standing on the bank and began stepping into the water. At first only to her ankles, then to her knees. Her father once watched from a distance and saw her wade in without flinching, even when the current pressed against her legs. She faces the opposite side of the creek, talking into the trees. Red Creek carried a rust-colored tint from iron deposits and decades of runoff. In daylight it appeared stained and murky. At night it looked darker. When she returned home after those nights, the clay clung to her. Red mud coated her feet and calves, drying along her ankles in cracked layers. Her clothes were soaked and heavy, streaked with rust-colored water. She did not rinse off. Sometimes she walked straight through the kitchen, across the hallway and up the stairs without stopping. The footprints were impossible to ignore. Wet, red impressions appeared on tile and hardwood. In the morning, her mother found dried clay near the sink, in the bathtub drain, and along the carpet outside Emily's room. A damp, metallic, earthy smell followed her through the house. When asked why she stood in the water, Emily answered calmly that someone wanted her closer. "Who?" her mother asked. "The one behind it," Emily replied. She never clarified what she meant. Her appetite diminished further. She lost weight. Her skin grew pale. Dark circles formed beneath her eyes. Her hair, once neatly kept, began to hang in uneven, damp strands, sometimes threaded with bits of river grass. She stopped tying it back and let it fall forward, partially obscuring her face. Her brother stopped sleeping with his bedroom door open. He said he did not like the sound of her walking at night, not the footsteps themselves, but the way she would suddenly stop. Sometimes she paused outside his door for several seconds before continuing down the hall. When confronted about it, she said quietly, "He's learning the house." Her father demanded she stop going to the creek. She didn't argue. She nodded and left again the following night. The family tried to limit her access. The back door was locked. The key was hidden. She opened a window instead. Mud appeared on the sill the next morning. One evening, she returned home drenched to the waist. Her shirt clung to her shoulders, and red water dripped from her sleeves. She stood in the doorway for several seconds before stepping inside. Her mother later said, Emily did not look angry or distressed. She looked occupied, as if listening to instructions. That was the first night she did not go to bed immediately. She stood in her bedroom facing the window for nearly an hour. Her brother heard her whispering again in the same low, controlled tone. When her mother finally entered the room, Emily did not turn. "He's closer now," she said. "There's nothing out there," her mother replied. "He doesn't have to be." The next morning, a thin line of dried clay ran from Emily's bedroom window to the hallway. No one remembered her leaving. Around that time, the local pastor was quietly contacted, not for an exorcism, but for advice. He listened to the family's account and suggested stress, depression, and unresolved trauma. He agreed to speak with Emily privately. During their first conversation, she was reserved. She answered questions carefully until he mentioned the creek. Her expression then shifted. He asked why she went there. "Because it's not empty," she said. He asked what was there. "It walks behind it, behind the creek, behind the trees." That phrasing later appeared in an old church journal the pastor kept in storage. A handwritten entry from decades earlier referenced something that walked the backwater at night. A presence described not as attacking, but waiting. The pastor did not share that entry, but he remembered it. One night, just after midnight, her father again stood at the field's edge. He watched her step into the water up to her waist. She didn't shiver or hesitate. Across from her, partially obscured by trees and mist, he saw it again. It stood taller than any branch, completely still. This time, he did not question whether it was a shadow. He knew the difference. As Emily finally turned and walked back toward the house, he felt something else. Recognition. As if the thing across the creek also noticed him. By the time she reached the porch, red clay dripping onto the wood, He understood with quiet certainty that the creek was no longer something she visited. It was something she was bringing home. By late autumn, the family no longer tried to stop Emily from leaving at night. They had learned that locking doors and hiding keys only delayed her. She always found another way out. Windows were opened, screens were removed. Mud continued to appear on the sills. The walks became longer. Sometimes she was gone for hours. When she returned, she rarely spoke. She moved through the house slowly, deliberately, as if conserving energy. Her clothes were almost always damp. Her hair hung in dark, uneven strands. Her skin looked thin and colorless beneath the porch light. She no longer tried to explain herself. When asked where she had been, she replied only, "With him." Her parents contacted doctors again. Medical exams showed dehydration, malnutrition, and severe sleep disruption. No neurological disorder was found. No evidence of substance use appeared. Medication was prescribed, then adjusted, then discontinued when it produced no improvement. Nothing changed. The pastor requested a meeting at the house, not an exorcism, a prayer session, a final attempt at intervention. One evening, Emily agreed to sit with her parents, her brother, and the pastor in the living room. The curtains were closed. A single lamp illuminated the space. She sat calmly on the couch, her hands folded in her lap, her feet still faintly stained with red clay. The pastor began to pray. At first, Emily remained still. Then, without raising her voice, she interrupted him. "You buried it." The room fell silent. The pastor hesitated, then continued. "You built over it," she said. Her voice was flat, measured. "You forgot it." Her mother began to cry. The pastor asked her to repeat what she meant. Emily lifted her head and looked directly at him. "It didn't forget you." Then she collapsed. Not violently, not dramatically. She simply fell forward and stopped responding. An ambulance was called. At the hospital, doctors reported that her vital signs were unstable for several minutes before returning to normal. She remained unconscious through the night. When she woke the next morning, something had changed. The whispering stopped. She did not ask to go to the creek. She did not mention the one behind it. She remembered little of the past months, only fragments. Fog, water, standing. Her physical condition improved slowly. She began eating again. Her sleep normalized. The dark circles beneath her eyes faded. Her hair was cut short. Doctors described the recovery as unusual but not impossible. No explanation was offered. The family was relieved, but they were not reassured. Emily refused to walk near the creek. She would not cross the bridge. She would not look toward the trees. If asked about that time, she became distant. "I don't want to remember it," she said. Within a year, the family sold the farm. They moved several counties away. No announcement was made. No interviews were given. The pastor left Red Creek 2 years later. The church journal disappeared from storage. The footpath behind the farmhouse grew over. But Red Creek remained. Local residents continued to avoid it at night. Some claimed animals refused to drink from it. Others said fog gathered there more heavily than anywhere else. No official reports were filed. No investigation was reopened. What happened to Emily Carter was never categorized. It was not listed as a medical anomaly. It was not recorded as a religious incident. It was not studied. It simply faded from public memory, except among those who witnessed it. Years later, Emily was contacted through relatives. She declined all requests for interviews. In a brief written response, she stated only, "I don't think it's gone. I think it just stopped needing me." Possession stories often end with clear conclusions, a ritual, a victory, an explanation. This one did not. There was no declaration of deliverance, no confirmation of what followed her home, no proof of what stood behind the creek. Only a pattern, a place, and a young woman who walked into the water and came back changed. To this day, Red Creek remains unmarked. No signs, no warnings, no barriers. People still pass it without noticing, still fish in it, still walk along its banks, unaware of what once waited there, and of how quietly it learned to be invited. Thank you for joining us this evening. If this story unsettled you, that's because it was never meant to entertain. It was meant to remind you that some places carry memories, some places remember, and sometimes all it takes is one person listening long enough for something to answer. Until next time, stay aware and stay safe.